Mr. Matthew Blanc, Executive Counsel for Governor John Bel Edwards. Mr. Matthew, welcome back to Keel. How you doing this morning, sir?
I'm doing fine, Robert. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure. Let's start here. We had State Representative Alan Seabaugh in studio yesterday, and in a nutshell, he said the governor's emergency mandate has ended. It is over. I would assume you and the governor disagree. Tell us why.
Well, not just the governor and I, but the law disagrees with that, and I know Mr. Seabaugh is very familiar with it. What the law says, and this is in the Health Powers Act, under which the governor has declared this emergency, it specifically says that one chamber, in this case the House of Representatives, can petition the governor to terminate the emergency, but it takes an act by the governor. It specifically says that the governor is required to make an additional action to terminate his own emergency before the emergency terminates. And that's clear in the law. I know, by the way, the Attorney General has been out this weekend stating that he like Mr. Seabaugh, now believes that the emergency is terminated. But if you go back to the opinion that was written by the Attorney General back just a month ago, on September 8th, he too agrees that the emergency is not terminated. I'm reading from his opinion back on September 8th. He says this portion of law recognizes that the termination is not effective until the governor acts in accord with the legislature's petition. So obviously the Attorney General has changed his mind. I don't know if Mr. Seabaugh has read that opinion or not, but the law is clear that the governor's order remains in effect
if
right
the
now.
Governor feels, if the governor feels that the petition passed by the House of Representatives is invalid, why does he feel the need to sue to have it rendered invalid by a court?
Well, because for the very reason that you asked the first question, in that if Mr. Seabaugh, the Attorney General, others are out there telling the folks in their communities that the governor's order has been terminated by the act of the House of Representatives, then people need certainty. People need to know what the rules are. And the governor has been very clear that he's going to take every step that he believes necessary to help Louisiana respond to this emergency, and it is an emergency. And so what the step the governor took yesterday is to let's make it clear and let's have a court determine whether or not the petition signed by the House by the 65 members of the House of Representatives is valid or invalid. The governor believes that it's clearly invalid and believes the court is going to say so.
Mr.
But
Seabaugh,
people of Louisiana deserve certainty, and they deserve to know what the rules are.
One of the points Mr. Seabaugh made about the validity of their petition was that I think the ruling states, the law states, that the legislature or one of the two houses can rescind the governor's emergency act at any time. I don't have the wording exact right. I would assume that you disagree with that, but it does say that, right?
It does. That's correct, and that's one of the allegations that the governor made in the suit that was filed yesterday in Baton Rouge here in the 19th Judicial District, is a determination that statute that Mr. Seabaugh is quoting is unconstitutional, because what it essentially allows for is one chamber of the legislature to act and make a decision on behalf of the entire legislature. And that's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says that the legislature can only act through the House and the Senate, not either one of them. There were some bills that were in this last legislative session that would have cured that would have made it a constitutional provision by saying that both the House and the Senate would act to respond to and to review a governor's emergency declaration. People like Mr. Seabaugh objected to that and caused it not to pass. And so here we are. And so the governor just firmly believes and is confident that a court is going to say so, that the legislature cannot act through one of its bodies, in this case, the House.
If the governor feels he needs to go to court and have this petition declared unconstitutional, doesn't that sort of mean that it's constitutional now? And does he feel any burden to go along with his constitutionality?
No, for a couple of reasons, and I appreciate that question, Robert. But the statute also says, the same statute also says that the governor shall not terminate the emergency until the emergency is over. And look, that I guess that's what we sort of come to the crux of this. If you listen to Mr. Seabaugh and others, they're telling you the emergency is over, but Mr. Seabaugh's been saying that the emergency has been over since May. Since April, when he's been pushing this petition. And so I just ask you and your listeners to think about if he had his way back in April and May when he was pushing this petition. He's been pushing it for months.
Is it the governor's stance is it the governor's stance that only the governor can determine or say when an emergency is over?
It is that, and I think that's what the law says that. But of course, that's what we're going to go and have a determination about. But I mean, I just ask you and your listeners to think about when this was being challenged back in April and May, if that had been the case and the emergency had been terminated then, and then we saw the crisis that we saw in late June and early July, where we would have been without the governor's measures. And we know they work. We know masks work. We know avoid large gatherings work. And those are all recommendations made by the White House Coronavirus Task Force because they know what works too. And it's based on data and science. And all of the governor's decisions have been based on those recommendations and the experts. So
just to clarify, it is the governor's stance that only the governor can declare when an emergency of any type ends.
Well, the statute makes it clear that the governor is the one who has to terminate his own emergency. That's what the law says.
Not that you necessarily, I want you to speak for the governor, but I'm sure you've spoken to him. What is the governor's message, do you think, to bar owners, restaurant owners, business owners across the state who are following all of this and are going, what do I do?
Well, look, I recognize that's a challenge, especially when they're getting conflicting messages from the Attorney General himself, saying one thing one month, the next thing something else another month. What the governor is asking people to do, because it's based on science and data, is to follow his orders as to relates to the gatherings, as it relates to the capacity limitations, as it relates to mask wearing, because we know those things work. And look, whether it's through the governor's orders or not, the way that we're going to get control of this until we have mass use of vaccines, the way we're going to get control of this is through these mitigation measures that have been proven not just in this response to this pandemic, but it have been proven time and again this is the way out of this. But we're going to be right back in the same soup we were in late June, early July, if all of a sudden people just say, well, we don't need to worry about this anymore. We're going to be back in that same problem where we have crisis care in our hospitals, where we're running out of ICU beds, like we're seeing all over the country, Robert. And all you have to do is look and see what's going on in states like Alabama, Mississippi, our neighbors right next to us. The Governor Reeves in Mississippi just reinstituted the mask order that he had taken away just a month ago. He is ordering again masks to be implemented in a whole bunch of counties in Mississippi because he's seeing the same data that we're seeing.
Just to clarify, the governor's, the ATC and or fire marshal enforcement of the governor's emergency order for the foreseeable future will not change.
Right. I mean, but the governor's always said from the beginning, I'm sure you've heard him say this many times, Robert, that he doesn't believe we can enforce our way out of this emergency. We need people to do their very best to comply. And look, when you said, look, what does the governor say to bar owners? He knows this has been extremely tough on everybody, on bar owners, on businesses that have not been able to make it. But we also know that we are in the middle of a historic emergency that has claimed the lives of 5,600 people in this state. And if we don't do our part to continue to make sure we respond to this emergency the right way, we're going to have thousands more that we will lose if we don't do this.